Overnight strikes into Israel and Iran continued for a third day, leaving over 230 people dead and neither country backing down. Sirens were again heard over Tel Aviv and other cities, and buildings were destroyed in a neighborhood in central Israel, wounding at least 10 people. Emergency services also struggled to contain fires in Haifa, where an oil refinery was damaged. Iran raised its death toll on Sunday to 224 people, and health authorities reported that 1,277 were wounded. Iran also acknowledged Israel had killed more of its top generals, including the Revolutionary Guard intelligence chief Mohammad Kazemi. Israel said Iran fired over 270 missiles since Friday, 22 of which slipped through its Iron Dome defense system, leaving 14 people dead and wounding hundreds of others. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said she will convene an emergency meeting of the bloc's foreign ministers via video link on Tuesday.
A man suspected of shooting 2 Democrat lawmakers in the United States has been arrested after a 2-day manhunt. 57-year-old Vance Butler was found in a woods in Minnesota.
This remains a very active.
He is accused of posing as a police officer and fatally shooting former Democrat House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband in their home on Saturday in Minneapolis. Governor Tim Walz called the shooting a, quote, politically motivated assassination and thanked officers for their hard work.
Spent Father's Day away from their families to deliver justice for Melissa and Mark Hortman and their children who spent this Father's Day alone.
Authorities say Butler also shot Senator John Hoffman and his wife at their residence in Minneapolis. They were injured but survived the wounds. Investigators found a hit list of nearly 70 names in the suspect's car, mostly naming Democrat politicians or figures with ties to abortion rights.
Leaders of some of the world's biggest economic powers have arrived in the Canadian Rockies for a G7 summit. This year it is overshadowed by an escalating conflict between Israel and Iran and U.S. President Donald Trump's unresolved trade war. As summit host, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney has decided to abandon the annual practice of issuing a joint statement at the end of the meeting. With other leaders wanting to talk to Trump in an effort to talk him out of imposing tariffs, the summit risks being a series of bilateral conversations rather than a show of unity. Some leaders have already had bilateral talks, such as Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni and her British counterpart Keir Starmer. Donald Trump was one of the last leaders to arrive late on Sunday, a day after he hosted a controversial military parade in Washington, D.C. French President Emmanuel Macron emphasized that Greenland is not to be sold or taken during a visit there on Sunday. Standing alongside the Danish and Greenlandic prime ministers, Macron expressed strong criticism of U.S. President Donald Trump's intention to take control of the Arctic territory.
The situation in Greenland is clearly a wake-up call for all the Europeans. And let me tell you very directly that you are not alone. And when a strategic message is sent to you, I want just for you to know that it's clearly perceived by the Europeans as targeting a European land. And this flag you have here is our common flag.
Sunday's symbolic stop to Greenland came as Macron was on his way to a G7 summit in Canada that Trump is also attending. While in Greenland, the three leaders held a meeting on a Danish helicopter to discuss security and visited a fast-melting glacier to highlight the consequences of climate change. Tens of thousands of demonstrators took to the streets in The Hague dressed in red to protest the Dutch government's policy towards Israel on Sunday. It was the second time the so-called Red Line protest took place in the Dutch political capital, exceeding the turnout for a similar event last month. Local media estimated the crowd at 100,000 people, while organizers put the numbers closer to 150,000. As they walked past the ICJ headquarters at the Peace Palace, the demonstrators symbolically drew a red line they say the government has failed to draw to halt Israel's campaign in Gaza. Alongside The Hague, another red line protest was also held in Brussels with an equally high turnout. Organizers estimated a crowd of 110,000 people. Several rallies have been held to draw attention to Israel's actions in Gaza, but Sunday's was the biggest rally so far.
Thousands of people took to the streets of several cities across southern Europe on Sunday in the latest protest against over-tourism. In the Spanish city of Barcelona, where the main demonstrations took place, some fired water pistols at shop windows and set off smoke. Organised by the Alliance Southern Europe Against Over-Tourism, demonstrators joined forces with groups in Portugal and Italy. They argue that uncontrolled tourism is sending housing prices soaring and forcing people out of their neighbourhoods.
Es una ciudad que ya no da más. Ni los recursos hídricos ni el transporte público está masificado los 12 meses del año.
Los alquileres siguen subiendo, sigue estando masificada la ciudad. Nos sacan de los barrios, nos sacan de nuestro centro histórico.
The ongoing protests have been a rallying cry for governments and cities to rethink their tourism models.
Will health pay the price in the next EU long-term budget? With growing demands in areas like defence, concerns are mounting over whether health will be pushed aside. The European Commission is set to unveil its proposal for the next 7-year EU budget in July, but early rumours suggest that dedicated health funding could be merged with other programmes, or worse, eliminated entirely. The COVID-19 pandemic prompted a historic shift. For the first time, member states agreed on a standalone 5.3 billion health fund, known as EU for Health. Now many worry that this may have been a one-off.
If we are not able to protect this, to have a ring-fence budget, a separate health program within the budget, I'm afraid that this will all be diluted, that this will all be absorbed by some big other fund in the budget, and definitely will lose this focus on healthcare that we have now.
Uncertainty is sparking wider concern in the health sector ahead of the Commission's budget proposal.
If we pull back from health investment, we're going to see more delays, we're going to see less access to innovation, we're going to see deterioration of health outcomes, and consequently we're going to see a reduction in productivity, economic output. Health is an investment to be made, not a cost to be managed, and if we do so, we'll improve the health and the wealth of our countries.
EU for Health has already supported key projects, including a 1.3 million initiative tackling Europe's nursing shortage by promoting the profession in countries facing the biggest gaps.
How does a quarry become the largest and one of the most unique open-air stages in Europe and the set for some of the world's most famous operas? Situated just a few kilometres outside of the Austrian town of St. Margarethen, it's where Richard Wagner's opera The Flying Dutchman is being staged this summer. It takes nearly 2 years of preparation to produce an opera, creating sets that will work in Europe's largest open-air theatre.
An opera is decided, and then the leading team comes together, makes their first outline, their draft of how the stage is going to look like, and then it goes into the manufacturing. Then all this will be done over months and months of time until it's mounted here in the Steinbruch. So that is the interesting part. And then comes the first day of rehearsal.
The bigger scenery is moved by machine, the lighter sets by hand. This, for example, is the House of the Dutchman's love interest centre. The stage manager shows how it can be moved without any effort during a performance. Quarry rocks have been included as an integral part of the set, but with a stage of about 950 square metres, the biggest challenge is the huge space.
Nálunk nincsen hívó berendezés, mindent lábmunkával kell elvégeznünk, és hát a színpadnak a legszélsőbb pontja és a szólóöltöző között van körülbelül egy olyan 160 méter távolság. Így nem csak nekünk, hanem minden résztvevőnek is ez egy nagy kihívás, ugyanis nem elegendő közvetlenül a színpadra lépés előtt megjelenni, hanem bele kell kalkulálni ezeket a távolságokat.
The weather is also a major challenge. The scenery is built to withstand wind and rain, but in the event of a storm, the show is cancelled. Director Philip Kren says that it's not only the quarry rocks that have been incorporated into the production, but the sunset as well.
You're depending on weather, you're depending on even little birds. When they're flying down, you're really connected to the nature, and that's kind of a bit of Hollander feeling as well, because he's so connected to the nature, he can't disappear, and it's kind of he's connected with the water, and Santa is connected with the earth, and they bring all that stuff together.
Over 60 artists perform on the huge stage at once, and spectacular set elements like the waves of the sea dwarf the human beings.
And it will be really amazing when this ship comes out with the whole crew on it, and it's amazing to have this big view.
The quarry, owned by the Esterházy Foundation, has been in operation since Roman times and is now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's also the source of material for many of Vienna's iconic buildings, such as St. Stephen's Cathedral, which is still supplied with stone from the quarry for repairs and maintenance.